The oceans are our lifeline. They're home to an industry that includes tankers and cruise liners, container ships, as well as super yachts and pleasure craft. And it's a fast-growing industry too, with twice as many vessels at sea as there were 20 years ago. A global enterprise so huge and complex needs more than just regulation. It depends on a wealth of capabilities and services. And you'll find a wealth of them represented in the Isle of Man Maritime organisations.
With a thriving business community that enjoys world-class connectivity, a favourable tax regime and a commercially aware government, the Isle of Man is an ideal place for companies of all kinds to flourish and grow. Isle of Man Maritime augments that with a dedicated service for the shipping industry that's based here, bringing private enterprise and government together in a partnership which serves the needs of its members wherever the fleet travels across the world. Employing the latest technology, maximising the flexibility of the internet, including new tools and apps developed by local companies, Isle of Man Maritime brings benefits to ships, crews and owners, and is helping to protect the biosphere on which all of us depend. Our members reap the benefits of our forward-looking philosophies, the breadth and diversity of local expertise, and they enjoy the added security of consular access worldwide, and ultimately the protection of the Royal Navy.
The Isle of Man can look back on a millennium of peace and stability, though when history called, Manx sailors have always answered, from Trafalgar to Dunkirk. There was a Manxman at the helm of HMS Victory during the Battle of Trafalgar, and William Hillary built this tower in Douglas Harbour to give refuge to sailors in peril. Now its reach extends around the UK coastline through the lifeboat RNLI service he created.
We're aware of our past, proud of our heritage, but our eyes are firmly set on the future.
By providing a forum to discuss ideas and opportunities, Isle of Man Maritime helps the modern maritime industry progress towards growth and development. And that ethos is attracting more and more companies to make a home here.
Maritime business in Isle of Man is very important. Isle of Man government supported the ship registry coming into a national registry in 1984. And the whole purpose of the ship registry was to encourage maritime business in Isle of Man and diversify the economy. We have a thriving maritime cluster organisation which supports a diverse range of maritime economies, from crewing services, corporate service providers, professional services, insurance and IT. Anything that we do in that maritime space that we can export internationally is vitally important for the economy.
Isle of Man Maritime, always receptive to new ideas, adopting and adapting them into our vision of a sustainable future for our industry and our ocean lifeblood.
As technology shrinks the globe, we're using it to expand our reach and change the way that we operate. Using the power of the internet to benefit individuals, entire crews and the whole world, while adopting the ISM code for cybersecurity, because not all pirates come aboard in the traditional way. With Inmarsat links, individuals can phone home in a way that was never possible before.
Last year, Isle of Man Ship Registry became the first flag state in the world to witness and accredit a periodical inspection remotely. With Isle of Man-based companies like IC and Marine Clean, we're helping to keep an eye out for pollution and remove it where we can. We're on the threshold of ever more technical and scientific advances. Being alert to all that and fostering a shipping cluster that understands and builds on that potential is one of our core values.
Well, good morning everyone, and thank you for joining us for the first of 3 webinars hosted by Isle of Man Maritime as part of London International Shipping Week. This morning's discussion is on the digital future for maritime, something we've all been thrown into in recent years. And we've assembled a great panel with representation from throughout the industry. We have an owner, a crew manager, a flag state regulator, and 2 from the tech side with a software and digital solutions provider and a provider of global satellite communications. My name's Dick Welsh. I'm an old maritime relic, and it's a great honour to be asked to moderate this panel today. It's my job to chair the discussion between our panel of experts and yourselves as valuable attendees. And only by making this as interactive as possible will we all get the most out of it. To make it all happen, we have Lee Clark-Vorster, General Manager of Isle of Man Maritime, who's on the controls this morning to take questions from you as delegates and to relay them to me for offering up to the panel. For this, we'll use the magic of Slido, and you should see it on the banner at the foot of your screens. The webinar's been recorded, so anyone who's unable to make it today will be able to play it once it goes live. And we'll share these links with you once it's available, so please share those freely. Stay with us, please, and enjoy the session. Get involved as I look forward to posing your questions to the relevant panelists as we go. So without further ado, let me introduce my panel. Firstly, Cameron Mitchell. Cam is the Director of the Isle of Man Ship Registry, the largest member of the British Red Ensign Group of Registers, and one of the world's most prestigious flags for merchant ships and super yachts. Cameron is a regulator and a service provider to his clients, which is always something of a balancing act. Dr. Bruce McGregor is a Director of PDMS Limited, a Manx-based company offering digital transformation and software solutions to a variety of industries. Bruce and his team are focused on solutions for the maritime industry. Nadeem Samaha is Director of Bridgefort Maritime, which is a boutique ship advisory and management company based in the Isle of Man with offices in Hamburg. And Nadeem will be able to provide us with a ship owner's perspective. On my left, Dr. Ben Hextall is the owner and managing director of OceanWeb, a company based in the Isle of Man providing maritime communications, IT and cybersecurity services to super yachts, which we all know lead the industry in their hunger and demand for bandwidth and availability of global satellite comms, something the entire industry will probably follow. And last but by no means least, we have Aashish Puri, is a Director of Maritime Oil and Gas Consulting Services, a company with many strings to its bow, but Aashish will focus primarily on crew management here today, and Aashish is joining us remotely from Germany, from Hamburg this morning. So morning, Aashish. Before we kick off, I'd like to set the scene. We're assembled here in a studio in the Isle of Man, with Aashish joining us online from Hamburg. We have the best tech available, set up by ELS, a Manx company with a phenomenal range of services. So this should look and feel like we're all together in a conference venue, albeit with Aashish on a monitor alongside the panel. I have access to your questions on a monitor in front, so please come forward with questions throughout the session. We will also have a question for you as the virtual audience. Towards the end of the session, we'll show a question with multiple choice answers on Slido as a poll to determine what your priorities are in the digital transformation of this industry, and we'll share those results on screen, so please use that. It's one option and one option only, but we'd be really interested to see how that runs throughout the session. In chairing, it's my job to keep the panel, to keep them brief and stay on point. Any straying or going on too long, and I have a virtual cattle prod to keep it moving along, haven't I, Lee? So let's get the party started. There are no easy years in shipping. Change is probably the only thing we can rely on. But we've all been through it these last 2 years with the global pandemic, which we've come to know as COVID-19. It's turned our world upside down, and it's forced us to rethink what we're doing and how we're doing it. If we consider the pandemic to be a catalyst for change, so my first question is really, in relation to this need to change, what did or what does this mean for your company or organisation? If I can ask you that, Cam, first of all.
Yeah, sure. Morning, everyone, and thank you, Dick. I think we quickly realised that we were better prepared than we actually thought we were at the ship registry. We'd invested in our digital systems, our databases, and really that set the scene quite nicely for us to make a sort of smooth transition to home working. We were able to issue digital and electronic certification. We've been doing that for about 2 years. And that allowed us to carry on with our sort of compliance and regulatory duties, I suppose, in that respect. So we transitioned to the home working. Our database is accessible globally, so worldwide. We invested in mobile tech for our staff team, which enabled them to continue to work from home as long as we had to. And latterly, we looked at remote survey and inspection technology. So that was a big move from us. The one part of the compliance puzzle that we couldn't put together was getting to ships. So we've invested in a company called Libra. We've signed up with them, and we now use them for remote survey and inspection of ships. And I would say so far, since its implementation fully in January this year, we've probably carried about 80, I suppose, remote inspections, and that would be general inspections of ships, DOC audits for ISM compliance, etc. So we've moved a long way.
Fantastic. Bruce, if I can ask the same thing to you, what did or what does this mean for your company in the provider of tech?
I think as a digital transformation solutions company, and then we've done a lot of planning and similar to Cameron's comments there, we spent a lot of years in looking at our business continuity, moving digital transformation, putting it in place. So we were in a pretty good place, and yes, like everyone else, we had to move pretty quickly to operate from home. But that, thankfully, because of those things we'd already put in place, didn't provide us too many challenges. But that was not just because we're an IT company, and I think it's something that I'll bring forward in the debate as we go forwards. It's because we had put that effort into the consideration of what services we needed to offer, not and to our customers and so forth, but also internally to our employees and so forth, how they were going to engage. So it was around using those tools and making sure everyone had access to and had those services. So in terms of that direct impact, we were able to work from home pretty easily. We had all the kit and everything else in place. So really it's what we've been engaging with there is then trying to reach out as quickly as possible to our customers and to organisations to provide solutions and support where they perhaps weren't as well as ready, or their operations simply don't all suit digital. I mean, not all operations can be fully digital, so it's flushing out really how those new interactions between what is new digital transformations, transformed services, and how they interact with the business operations for our customers. Thanks.
Nadeem, same question to you.
Yep.
What's it like from the owner's perspective?
I would say that we are probably less prepared initially. Certainly, I think IT and tech didn't feature too highly on our to-do list when we were planning 2020. We travelled a huge amount, and that was to see. I mean, look, we work primarily with institutional investors and funds and family offices. We operate vessels as asset managers on their behalf, so it was very key for us to have good and consistent communication with our investors, but also with the vessels and our service providers. So I think for the past 2 years prior to the pandemic, I was on a plane on a weekly basis. So as soon as all the travel restrictions came in, it became very difficult to go out and meet people face to face. in terms of what we did for our staff, we were very quick in getting them laptops, making sure they had internet connection, smartphones, so that at least we could all communicate together, that we had access to the databases we required, and really just worked very quickly to establish, communication channels and keep those communication channels open with our investors and service providers. So I think we adapt quickly, but it certainly wasn't something that was on our radar, I think, when we were planning, 2020 and what to do. I remember sitting there in Q4, looking at which marketing events we would go to, conferences, and that all changed very, very quickly.
Yeah. And Ben, from a IT comms perspective for the vessels, for yourselves?
I mean, for us, it was probably similar with Bruce. We had a lot of the systems in place. We provide managed IT support. Its majority of it is remote anyway, and we're dealing with large yachts, which can also be viewed as remote assets. So a lot of the systems and processes we had in place to be able to carry on working remotely and support these vessels. I think for us, one of the changes was the inability to send an engineer out to do some work on the yacht. So we sort of developed a global network of support partners, really. So we could call on a local engineer in a port who could do some of the works for us. And I think also embracing some of the other technologies, doing more on Zoom, Teams, WhatsApp, so you could actually improve that interaction with the clients. So, yeah.
So I mean, most of the responses back are, we can leave the office, we all go away home, and I guess every industry, that's what happened. People started working from home. But maritime's more than that, isn't it? It's a global industry. Were there any specific challenges in there? Cam's already mentioned getting surveyors. You've mentioned getting bits of kit on board. It's a global 24/7 industry. Were there any specific challenges or things that you rose to that you're proud of during that? To anybody, I mean, sorry.
I mean, I think for us, we saw a massive demand in bandwidth requirements, and unfortunately I'll come on to that a few more times in the future, but the crew, I think for crew welfare, they need bandwidth. Everybody wants to stream these days like people are doing at home. So delivering stable internet to the vessels is important.
And I think one of the things from our perspective was speed of response. Everyone was under so much pressure. The nature of that sort of chaotic enforced transition that we've been referring to, normal becoming somewhat extreme normal, and everyone talking about what the new normal is. But in the organisations we were dealing with and the solutions we were providing, understandably, customers needed parts or needed different things, but they needed them tomorrow. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things I'm very proud of as an organisation is rising to that challenge, because it was a challenge because everyone needed it. It wasn't just this area or this area. We were all in the same position. So I think being able to bring to the fore the sort of activities and the services that we provide, and just keeping dialogue with people out there as well to make sure that you can respond as quickly as possible.
I think if I can step in there, Dick, I think what we quickly realised was our interactions with ships and ship owners, ship operators, the challenges around that were based around how far those ship owners and operators were along the road in their digital journeys would be a good example. Yeah. So those shipping companies and operators that had better ship-to-shore connection and were already had that established, I suppose, it was easier for us and probably easier for them. Yeah. In a lot of aspects around, survey, inspection, arranging all those things, getting things in place. So. And
I guess throughout the fleet, you've probably got a wide range of internet ready and capabilities. I've got a question from the floor. Neil Milton from the UK Hydrographic Office. Thank you, Neil. If I could just pose, good morning. Focusing on navigation, what's the biggest challenge that you still encounter? And how would you like to see that change? Thinking about the digital space of that. Who would like to take that one?
Are we talking about not about navigation as in compass navigation. We're talking about that transformation.
Well, it's the UK Hydrographic Office, so
Yeah.
it's about electronic charts,
Right.
digitising navigation for vessels and for seabed mapping. I would imagine, Neil. Cam, sounds like one for you.
Being an engineer, I'm not too very good at navigation, but I mean, I think the world's moving on. I think we will see much more digitisation across navigational systems. We're already talking about autonomous ships and sort of autonomous systems on ships. I think we're still quite away from that. I know there's good examples of launches that are working and are currently operating and being tested. I still think that all of that requires increased bandwidth, so increased connectivity. So for all of this to happen, smart ships, intelligent ships, we're going to need increased bandwidth everywhere. And I think that'll be fundamental to improvements in all things on board ships.
Yeah.
The other thing we're seeing is if you're uploading charts electronically, one of the issues there is a cybersecurity risk, because effectively you have to connect your navigation system to the internet to get those charts, and that causes a few headaches. So you have to plan good systems for that.
Yeah.
I think for us, one of the biggest challenges is it's not necessarily on the data side, it's more on the supply chains, right? So we have very data-driven clients in the institutional investors we work with. They want to know what's happening all the time. Specifically when it came down to COVID, we were running multiple scenarios on what impact COVID would have on our own supply chains, getting spares and lubes onto the ships, how that would impact operating costs. I think one of the areas where we struggle with quite a lot is on the crewing side. Certainly, crew changes became very expensive. So I think, we're kind of looking at the investor side, but then also looking at, the other clients that we have, obviously other charterers of the vessels. So we have to continue to make sure that our vessels are operating, that we can get spare parts, that the crew changes go smoothly. And I think that's an area where, there had been some soundings earlier on around sort of crew COVID passports and areas like that, which I think is something which, digital transformation needs to really kind of look at.
Aashish is sitting there in Hamburg, and I must apologise. I've stayed in the present and not in the big World Wide Web. So Ash, can I bring you in there on that first question, just to see what differences, what challenges it was for your company in the immediate COVID world?
Morning, everyone, and good question. I think we were prepared in the preparations for COVID. The thing that we were not ready is that we didn't expect that there would not be any travel. We were planning a lot of marketing ideas, a lot of travels that were planned. That was paused. Where I say that we were prepared is on the side of payroll and training, because we are predominantly very heavy on that aspect, where we are providing digital payroll solutions for our customers. That's where we were already prepared. But what hit us was the challenge that all customers needed the solutions which were getting ready immediately. And that was the biggest challenge, where we had to really put a lot of resources into it and deliver solutions almost in a week's time.
Oh, thanks, Aashish. I've got another question in which is anonymous. I'll keep feeding these questions in. What have been the benefits of adapting to the new restrictions that COVID has brought? And if I could ask Ben, for instance, just give me a very simple benefit.
I think it's made everybody work a bit smarter. I think often there was a knee-jerk, I'll fly out and see a client, almost instantly, and you have to think, and I think you have to perhaps qualify those leads a bit better. And I think we've saved a fortune on travel costs.
And is anybody missing travel?
Not nowadays, with all the restrictions you have to go through, and the tests and the certificates.
I think there's a place for it, but as Ben said, it's I think one of the benefits has been that getting the value out of the communication technologies which were available, Teams, Zoom, all of the above. and doing those interactions where maybe sort of 80% of those it works really, really well. But I think there is a place for the, whether I'm making those percentages up, but the 20% of it to actually travel and meet face to face and move those forward. So that's, and this is perhaps part of the new world that everyone is talking about in terms of it will carry on because it is a benefit.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a mindset shift. I mean, look, pre-COVID, as I mentioned, we were traveling every week, and we probably didn't need to do half of those journeys in hindsight, but you wanted to be there in person. Shipping is very much a personable business. But what I found, which I thought wouldn't be the case, was in actual fact, people are much more readily available to discuss at short notice. It's very easy to set up a Zoom or a Teams call. You're not wasting time going to the airport. You've got so many more free hours in the day now. I think at the very beginning we kind of got that wrong, and we spent 9 hours on Zoom calls just jumping from one to the other. So I think there's got to be some self-discipline. But certainly in terms of travel budget, in terms of getting access to people very, very quickly, I think the whole world has really adapted quite well to that.
Cam?
Yeah, I think so a big benefit that we've realised is in our global network. So that's where we're investing now. So we're creating representative persons of business development managers. We had some, so we did have 3 in place at the start of the pandemic, and now we have 5. Right. So in the last 12 months, we've brought another 2 business development managers on, and we can only see growth in that. Yeah. Really, I mean, when you think about sustainability and development goals, or it makes perfect sense. We've reduced our air miles considerably. Yes, those business development managers around the world will still need our support, and we will still need to go and see them, but it will limit that travel requirement.
So more reliance on networks.
Yeah.
Aashish, can I bring you in on that? What benefits do you see to the brave new world?
Well, the benefit I see is that even though I could not join you all personally, which I would have loved to do in the studio, right? I'm joining you digitally from Hamburg. Considering the COVID restrictions, it didn't, as also Nadeem mentioned, it didn't make sense for me to travel with the quarantine regulations. But the benefit of this digitalization, advantages, as I would say it, is I'm fortunate enough that I can join the panel and we can have discussions. And even though there was a slight change to the plan, everything worked. And thanks to the ELS team, I would like to mention that here because they have been in the front foot of digitalization for us. So I think that's great.
Right, and I think that's borne out by this. I mean, London International Shipping Week, we would all have charged down to London, and it is a wonderful thing to do, but we've been able to do this, so that's probably answering to that question as well. If I just go back to what we were talking about before, if you think about the journey that you guys have been through, what about your customers? If I could ask Bruce, what did your customers, or what did you see that your customers were experiencing that?
I think one of the main things is that we're talking about digital transformation, but digital transformation, in its true sense, it's business transformation. And so, whilst there might be tools and things that people dive on because we've got to be able to do this now, the actual sort of real world digitalization that we're talking about is business change, and I think that in itself is a challenge because it's got to be recognised when you're looking at digitalising a service that it's about the outcome, and that is sort of classic business change. Look at it correctly, analyse it correctly, and understand what you want the outcomes to be as a business, and then look at how you're going to digitalise that. And I think one of the things with the pandemic is people have understandably had to respond and have done exceptionally well, but I think it's taken some time taking stock to make sure that you're actually looking at it in the context of your overall business and what you want your business outcome to be, to make sure you then engage with the right digitalisation solution and so forth. So I think that's one of the things we've seen quite a lot, and that's where we're trying to use our skills with our customers is to help them sort of look at that, stand back, and look at the digital transformation as part of a digital transformation and the outcome needed from it.
Anybody else want to? Bruce? Cam, sorry.
I think for us, those future changes, I suppose, it's developing what we currently have. So we currently have our database, MAVIS, Marine Administration Vessel Information System, which someone else in the panel, Bruce from PDMS, will know much about. We've been on a bit of a journey with that system as well. So moving forward, digital future, we need better data analytics on our ships. That's what we need to do. So how do we achieve that? Well, one of the things that we're going to do is look at changing our survey and inspection policy. So we will change what we do to make possibly 4 remote inspections in a 5-year period and one physical boots on deck, so a more blended approach. What does that do? Well, it provides us with more data more regularly, provides our clients with more data more regularly on our reports that we provide to them. So we believe that it has the possibility of improving the quality of the fleet and climbing those places on the whitelist and the Paris MOU, etc. So that's where we think we're travelling at the moment.
Ben, could I bring you in? Your customers will want it yesterday and
yes, and you can't travel out there. For us, the last 18 months, one of the areas that we've pushed with is we have a very strong, it's a global network of support engineers. So these are people that we can call and they can be on the yacht very easily, and we will then still be remotely logged in doing the work, but they are like a remote set of hands often for us. So some of those systems work really well. We're starting to do some IT training remotely, which is working quite well. A positive thing, I think, is quite often working remotely, you can sort out a problem much quicker. It's like a phone call, oh yeah, fixed it. Whilst conventionally, yes, we'll go out with, bag of spanners and cables and try and sort it out. And you can just go, yes, it's that. Right. So I think there are definitely positives with it all.
Yeah. That's similar to what Nadeem was saying, isn't it? It brings that, instead of it having to be 3, 4, 5 weeks from now, because it has to fit in with travel plans and everything else, that can be brought forward. Yeah. That in itself can create pressures, but as you say, you can get hands-on people there that much quicker, can't you?
Nadeem, your customer experience?
Yeah, I think from us, it's basically like 3, probably very simple pillars, right? It's having access to data. It's key that our clients on the investment side are up to date as to what's happening in shipping in general, with our vessels. We consume a lot of data that comes from our ships. We also consume a lot of the market data in terms of what's happening with, charter rates, freight rates, second-hand sales prices. Communication, as I mentioned before, that we used to travel a lot. Now we are, setting up regular and continuous calls with our technical managers, crew managers, to make sure that the vessels are operating okay, and we feed that back to our investment group. And thirdly is planning. I think, given the hurdles now with supply chains, with crewing, we have to plan that much more ahead in order to reduce costs, because we've all seen what's happened to freight rates. We simply have to plan around port schedules to get spares and crew changes done, because it all impacts the bottom line. And again, one of the key KPIs that we're judged on is the operating cost of our ships.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, if I move on now from the present into the future, and I'll start with you, Aashish. What future changes might follow on from what you've already achieved to continue yours and maybe your customers' digital journey and to be more effective, but looking into the future?
I think looking into the future, right, I would also kind of back up Bruce's point here that it is important that this whole digital transformation journey, it's not just a plug and play situation, but it's actually business transformation. And it's also looking at the future needs of our seafarers and our crews. The most important thing that we are focusing, as I said, is the training and the payroll. How this impacts is we are looking at more openness in the industry for digital training solutions, which were not so readily available back then. There has been a fast track. So COVID has been a catalyst of this, and we are transforming all the trainings in a digital format. Talking about payroll, we see that more and more companies would be looking at digital payroll solutions to ensure to reduce the number of errors in the system for the crew members. So that basically our vision of digital transformation is putting seafarers at the forefront and making sure that they are the key workers, and the digital transformation is supporting them at every single stage.
That's great. And Cam, if I could put the same to you, what does the future look like?
I think very much in all regulators and ship owners' minds at the moment is probably ship emissions and the different models that different jurisdictions are going to be bringing into place to monitor ship emissions. For us, it's currently we're collaborating with a company called Fuel Trust, who have a bunker insights model, which basically digitally tracks, provides authenticity, transparency of transactions from refinery straight the way through to suppliers, to the ship, and then to emissions. And it allows traceability, authenticity of fuels, can apply the risks associated with fuel. So it's a digital solution to a maritime problem, I suppose. And hopefully working collaboratively with Fuel Trust, we can actually determine the actual emissions from ships rather than using one of these model situations where per nautical mile of fuel burnt, this will actually be, if you burn this fuel in your ship, you will produce these emissions.
Right.
So an accurate and up-to-date model.
And is that going to be accepted by port states who have a duty to try and check whether ships' emissions
I think
are
if you can
compliant?
accurately determine your emissions rather than use a model, I think it's always going to be better.
Yeah. Bruce, how about the future for PDMS?
Well, I think in the context of some things we've been discussing, I think for us it's going to be doing more and pushing out to help organisations tie these things together. And relating to the point I was saying earlier on about the business transformation piece and what the outcome needs to be, is making sure that, take digital documentation for example. That's something that we've got solutions for, but there's various levels that people have approached that. It might just be a simple electronic signature, which has really facilitated people not having to be in the same place to physically sign something. But is that document validatable? Is it something that we trusted? Can you identify the organisation? That digital identity piece comes into it there. And for the organisation, that if it's a critical document like from a registry where it's a certificate, is that something that is digitally validatable? So, and making sure that ties into the systems that need it. Because if you create a digital solution, but it's kind of in the ether on its own, and you create another one, then you're creating that classic silo scenario. So it's making sure those things are working with customers to make sure that they understand and bolt these things together properly, so that they're actually getting the real benefit flowing through the whole organisation, the whole organisation's digital architecture, rather than we've got this over here, great, but that's actually created as a bit of a silo.
Nadeem, from an owner's perspective, what does the digital future look like?
I think a lot of it is around sort of monitoring the vessel emissions. I think that's key. I think if we look at our kind of customers, ESG is very much top of their agenda. So I think that will be the focus from an investment perspective. So understanding the emissions the vessel is putting out, seeing how we can improve that, is I think where most of the interest is going to be. Yeah.
And Ben, from a
for the future changes, yes, like with Bruce, things like e-sign has just made things a lot easier. I think the main for us main future change is just once again trying to deliver more and more bandwidth to these vessels. It's quite phenomenal what they actually want. I don't think not necessarily need it, but they want it. So this week we've been working with a new airtime provider to deliver a 40 meg VSAT solution, satellite broadband solution, on a private yacht, and that's a big step up from the normal speeds that can be achieved with VSAT. The other future things that we have to be aware of is the more bandwidth, the more connectivity, the more cyber risks. Again, it's like the doom and gloom. It's you give this and you have to be aware of that. So
I think it was mentioned earlier as well, Ben, which will come into that will be the data. I think Cameron has mentioned it. I think it's all been mentioned. The amount of data that people are going to need from lots and lots of different sources in terms of making sure that they can make those business decisions. That's going to all have to drive through, and a lot more of that information is going to be coming from the vessel. All the big data thing and the information, but it needs to feed the business decision makers. That will all just keep that demand going up and up and up and up, won't it?
I mean, every single component on a vessel now is demanding internet. It's IoT, and we have a request a couple of weeks ago to give remote access so that a company could fine-tune a lift on a yacht. And it's a huge amount of bandwidth just for that. So yeah, everything needs it.
I've got something else from the floor here again from an anonymous attendee. Good morning from Greece. What should be the response if the crew follow the shoreside media contact with their devices and forget their duties and responsibilities? This will encounter problems either at safety and security on board. Does anybody want to field?
Yeah, this is a simple one. A few years ago, we did a conference called Super Yacht in Crisis, and it was about handling if there's an incident, the fact that all the crew have got their Facebook, their WhatsApp, and sometimes I get sort of captains say, I know what my crew are doing by their Facebook feed. So it's a tricky one. It's got to be down to policies which you guys will implement, and perhaps down to bandwidth management where certain things are blocked, between 9 to 5. So.
Yeah, I think it's important that the crew interact with each other on board as well. Yeah, so I mean, whilst they need access to the news and the WhatsApps and things like that, I think there is, a case to be said. There should be some limits on it so that they actually, gel together as a team as well, rather than just stay in their cabins, sort of, Facebooking.
Yeah.
And what about the use of their devices while they're on watch or while they're on duty? That seems to be the intent.
Unfortunately, we do have experience of this. We have had a casualty, a fatality investigated on an Isle of Man ship with the MAIB, Marine Accident Investigation Branch in the UK, where the conclusion of the report was that the person involved in the incident, the seafarer, was distracted by his phone, completely distracted to the extent such that he was run over in a cargo operation and unfortunately died. So we've issued additional guidance on the use of mobile devices on board ships, when they should be used, when they shouldn't be used. We can only advise. The companies then, under regulations such as the ISM code, the International Safety Management Code, need to adapt their safety management systems to push through those policies and procedures which prevent, unfortunately, serious injuries and deaths.
And I guess just some plain common sense. Like I have to tell my kids, get off your phone. You don't do it while you're driving, so why would you do it while you're on the bridge of a ship? But I guess one of our other seminars will be dealing with seafarer wellbeing. I understand that's a safety issue, and I hope that we've been able to answer that. If I move on to the cultural organisational changes, we've talked about the digital journey, transformation, and I know from past experience and from studies that I've done that culture in an organisation will always eat strategy for breakfast. So you can bring in what you think you need to bring in, but there will always be cultural differences and cultural changes within that organisation that might try and prevent that. And I just wondered, if I start with Ben, obviously you're in a tech environment, you probably have a different sort of set of problems or a different kind of mindset amongst the staff to some of the others. But what do you feel about that?
I think, I mean, yes, we've been using digital technologies for 20 plus years, which has helped a lot. I think the other structural changes, I mean, we were ready to, unfortunately, have to work when we had to work from home. That was not too much of an inconvenience. I think the big one that we've seen on board the yachts is this. It's these bring your own device, and that for us is quite an interesting. So, in the old days, the crew would have a laptop or a work machine, and now they're all bringing their own devices, which leads back to that earlier question.
Yeah.
So we're now seeing, 2 or 3 phones, tablets, all these devices, and it's the managing of that. It's the monitoring, making sure they're safe, stopping viruses getting in, etc. That's one of the big things that we've seen change over the last few years.
Right. Cameron?
I think for us, the organisational structural changes have all been about learning new ways of working, I would say, and learning new skills. Remote survey and inspection, people may think it's easy. It's not. It's just as tiring for our guys, sitting looking at a computer for 8 hours, guiding someone around a ship, asking them to look at this, to look at that. It's a new skill. It's definitely a new skill. So that's taken a while to embed. It also changes the culture and the strategy of the organisation. Obviously, we're used to be going out to ships, boots on deck, physical inspections. So we've had to adapt to that. It's not easy for anyone, I would say. It's a different way of working. However, I'd like to consider that we're a nimble organisation, so we adapt quickly. Everyone knows in maritime change is frequent. It's not a new thing for us. So we've learned to adapt, I think, and change quickly, and we've had to do that over the last 18 months regularly. So,
Bruce?
I think for me it comes back to one of the comments I was bringing in earlier on, that digital transformation for an organisation, when you're talking about across the business in an operational level, digital transformation done well is a real commitment, because it's business transformation, and that it needs clear direction and commitment from the organisation and from the leaders in that organisation. It needs to be delivered with positive messaging. As Cameron's saying now, it's new skills. There's effort involved, and there's effort involved for not just the supplier of those services, which is considerable effort, but also for the business itself. And I think sometimes we see an organisation doesn't necessarily engage with that level of commitment. It is a journey, so it's not a light bulb on and off. Hey, let's go digital. Dink. Oh, done that. It's business transformation, and coming into that, that cultural change, then it's got to be kind of sold. It's got to be a positive thing. So it comes back to those outcomes. If you're engaging with your organisation and saying this is the outcomes we're aiming for, guys, and then it will encourage the whole organisation, and it's got to come from the top down. Forcing digitalisation on an organisation, that doesn't mean it's going to succeed. You've got to win those hearts and minds for people, because I can't stress enough the engagement through the organisation and allowing feedback mechanisms to say, well, this is the digital journey we're going on, but I'm going to struggle doing this, even though you've given me the tool, or I don't understand it, or I haven't had enough training, or you've got to get that into the organisation. So it is that commitment piece.
Yeah. Top to bottom. And led from the top.
And led from the top.
Bringing other people with them. Yeah. Nadeem, how about your views?
Yeah, I think if we look at our own organisation, right, so we have now team members all over the world in different time zones, but I think culturally, I come from a very sort of regulated banking background where you had to be in the office and you were there every day. To now, working in a more remote environment. I think there is the kind of idea of sort of mental welfare as well, when people are sitting at home for 3 months at a time, in their house, and so we made a conscious effort as a company to try and, we were very social pre-COVID, and we tried to continue to do that sort of during COVID. They'd always have team meetings. On a Friday afternoon, we'd have, almost like a Teams call where everyone have a bit of a drink. We'd still at our Christmas party online. So I think from our own organisation perspective, culturally, we tried to do everything we used to do, but just in a kind of digital setting. But there had to be a mindset shift, certainly. I think, we were very lucky in that, a lot of trust and emphasis was put on people, actually doing the work from home. And I think productivity actually went up. Because people didn't have to commute and they could log on at 9 o'clock and we could interact much more effectively. And that's there are a lot of out of the box solutions like Teams and Zooms that helped us. So it's been interesting, but I think everyone adapted very, very well.
Yeah. Aashish, if I can go to you, and then I've got a couple of questions from the floor. Just how about your views on the cultural changes required, or whatever you went through or are going through?
Well, looking at our own organization internally, we have had to be extremely agile in the last, let's say, 2 years period. We have expanded from working from 2 different countries. Now we are working from 5 different countries. That's also a goal in the right direction to support that we are closer to the customers. But the only way it helps is when there is more and more digitalization. So more than cultural kind of changes, I see we have had to make a lot of structural changes where we have had to be extremely agile and respond as quickly as possible in the current environment. And changes will also always be there, right? As Cam mentioned, I think we will constantly be changing. And now in the COVID period or post-COVID period, whichever way we address it, we will see more and more of these changes than before.
Thank you. If I could take a question from Andy House, who's part of Howden Speciality. How are ship operators to having their data used for insurance analysis? I think it's an inevitable outcome that insurers will require more and more data to benchmark risks, potential benefits and risks to early adopters. So it's really around, probably, Nadeem, you're probably best place to start with on this. Okay. Good luck with that.
Yeah. I wish it was very attractive. It depends on what data they need, I guess. I think there are already forums out there where, for example, there are OPEX data benchmarks. Yes. I'm assuming from an insurance perspective, he's probably talking more on kind of accident data.
Is he Poseidon principles and...
Yeah, potentially from the ESG perspective, I think there's obviously a drive from the financing side to focus on more efficient and younger kind of eco vessels. All we know is that we sign up to a number of different platforms that output huge amounts of data so that we can see some of the market trends, which also drives operating costs and insurance premiums. It depends on what data they want to take from operators, but I think the shipping community is willing to share I think high level numbers and their view. Forums in the past spoke openly, quite openly around what level vessels are being operated at. We can all look at what charter rates are doing, what vessels is fixed for which rate, etc., etc. So I just think it depends on what type of data. Maybe if Andy could tweet another question.
Well, I think probably ship operators are all in competition with each other, but they all need to understand. Yeah.
But it's quite
high level
quite
of
open in terms of,
data.
if you look at crew costs, if you look at bunker prices, lube prices, it fluctuates across the globe. But it's there's quite a lot of data available already.
Generally, as well as it's around access to data can be a good thing as well as it might count against. It's not automatically more access to data means that's going to be a problem. So if you've got a great operator and they're operating things with high quality services, all the rest of it, then they've probably got no issue with providing access to that data. So it can work for as well as it can work against. Yeah.
So I hope that's answered that question. There's another question here. I'll just fire a few quick questions. Is there scope for the use of blockchain in the maritime space? And that's from Russ Kent here on the Isle of Man. I know nothing about blockchain, but I do understand that it could be incredibly useful if the world agreed if we're talking about sharing data, it's that kind of platform, isn't it?
Just an initial comment, and I can write some thoughts as well. From a general point of view, and I'm not a blockchain techie, but blockchain it's a tool, and to a certain extent, what organisations have got to do for me comes back to that outcome piece again. What is it? Rather than look at something like blockchain and say, hey, blockchain's this tool. I want to plan my field. But I've got a bike. I'll use that. It may not necessarily be the right tool for the job. I'm not saying it isn't, but look at what the outcome needs to be, and then get the technologists, including blockchain experts, to look at it and go, is this the tool for the outcome that I need? Because there is a tendency for people to dive on something like this and go, everyone's saying it's a great thing, but actually, is it the right tool for the job? And there are plenty of technical solutions out there that would provide the outcome, in many cases, far better than the blockchain would. If you find that the outcome you want is a great fit for what blockchain gives, then absolutely.
Yeah.
So I would say, Dick, from our perspective, so the Fuel Trust, the company that we're collaborating with at the moment, that is a blockchain solution for recording fuel source, the fuel emissions. And the reason blockchain is brilliant at that is unaltered documentation. Once it's in there, it can't be changed. It's got provenance, it's got authenticity. And the transparency, data transparency comes into that as well. You can permission people to see your data within that blockchain, and only those people. So there's definitely a future for it.
And from my limited understanding, it could be accessed and edited from a number of different people globally at the same time. So and now I'm really getting into the world I shouldn't be in, but I understand, Ross, that it may have its uses, and I'll move on to a question from Nigel James of the Waves Group. In order to attract talent, in order to continue to attract talented seafarers into the industry within this very changed environment, regular communication with their family is key. How do the panel feel this can be improved to enhance seafarer welfare? So very briefly, because there is a separate panel on seafarer welfare, but it is critical and very, very important. So Ben?
For me, bandwidth, just giving a ginormous amount of bandwidth to a vessel so that all the crew, when they are allowed to use it, can use it and keep in touch. We've seen a lot of the big airtime providers have had the best years ever simply by providing colossal amounts of airtime. The demand has just gone up massively. So bandwidth.
Nadeem?
I think, look, very anecdotally, I think, we have obviously, many crew on our vessels, and I think, during COVID it's been tough to affect crew changes. So, crew have stayed on board sort of, for extended periods of time. So absolutely the communication channels need to be there for their welfare. So I think it's key. I think there's a balancing act between, too much access and isolation within the crew. So I think, I'm sure Aashish has a view on it, but I think there's definitely a balancing act there.
Aashish, can I bring you in on that, please? It's your field.
I think it's a good question, and it ties in exactly with crew welfare, which would be handled in the next seminar or webinar. But to answer that question, I would agree that the bandwidth has to be same. So it shouldn't matter if a crew is on board or at home. We are in 2021 now and soon approaching 2022. We should be at a stage in this digitalization journey where seafarers should have the same access as on shore for internet. So there shouldn't be a limitation on bandwidth. And that's the journey that the whole industry is working towards. Are we there yet? No. But it's a journey that we are constantly progressing. And I think as Bruce also mentioned before, and also that we are on this journey where bandwidth has to be unlimited.
And if I could pose something back to you, who is going to pay for this fantastic bandwidth? We all recognise it's hugely important. Who pays? If I could put you on the spot, Aashish.
Good. I think obviously when we talk about unlimited bandwidth. There's a cost involved in it. But we are talking about the future vessels. We are talking about connected vessels. We are talking about autonomous vessels. I don't think the bandwidth that would be required for the usage of the crew would be any different than any of the equipment that would be using this bandwidth. So I think it's in the interest of the ship owner to have this bandwidth not only for the crew welfare, but also for the future equipments that require very heavy bandwidth.
Yeah. Nodding in agreement, everybody.
I completely agree from my perspective is that we have our seafarers who have 24/7 access when they're at home, and then we put them onto a ship. If they don't have the same access, then we're isolating them from the real world, aren't we? That's what we're doing. So we're actually isolating people by sending them to sea because we're taking away those privileges and those rights.
Yeah, and today's youth, it's like taking the right arm. I think we probably agree. I'm gonna ask one more question to kind of wrap this up, and then I've got a couple more audience members that I want to get to. So brevity is the key for this. So if I said it's magic wand time and you could wave a magic wand to change maritime for the better, what barriers or hurdles to complete this digital transformation would you remove? And if I can ask Ben first.
Right, magic wand time. I think if we were in a position to give all vessels like uncapped, unlimited internet access, I think, for the crew, it's that isolation, the crew welfare. I think everything would benefit. I think you'd get to a stage where, yes, colossal amounts of data onto a vessel. I think the crew will all go mad for a few days or weeks doing non-stop streaming. And then I think you realise, actually, I've got the bandwidth, I'll carry on working. And we see quite often big peaks in bandwidth when things have been improved or upgraded. They go, wow, this is amazing. And then crew are sensible, go back to...
And what's the barrier to doing that today?
It's technology and cost. I mean, there's a lot of interesting players. Conventionally, satellites are done through KU, Inmarsat, the big airtime players. And there's some new systems coming out which will be ready in the next couple of years, which are bringing in what they call LEO, which is low Earth orbit, which will be much faster systems, lower latency, and will give you almost on a vessel what we take for granted at home. And it's like the Marine is always playing catch up on that. The Marine is like probably 5-10 years behind what we're getting now at home.
We're down to one or two word answers now.
Nadeem?
I would say very quickly, in terms of barriers and hurdles for digital transformation, it would be resistance to change. I think it's a human element that people don't necessarily like to adopt new ways of doing things. And I think shipping in the past has been probably guilty of that.
Very conservative industry, thanks.
I would say a digital identity, a trusted, authenticated and accepted globally digital identity for organisations and for people. Why not have a digital identity for all seafarers? Because any transaction there, whether it's a business transaction, a personal transaction or an interaction, it would facilitate so many things.
Yeah. Cam?
Electronic transactions from a regulatory and compliance perspective. So what that would allow us to do is to accept electronic transactions at the ship registry for the likes of powers of attorney, mortgage documents, bills of sale, electronically notarized. Yeah. So that would just make a huge difference to processes and procedures for us. And I think it will go that way. It's just a matter of time.
It's just a matter of time. Aashish, and then I'm going to bring in the poll.
Yeah, I would just add on to the digital identity, which gives visa-free access to the seafarers, which facilitates crew change in different countries for different nationalities.
I totally agree with everything that's been said. Lee, can I? Oh, here we go. So we've had a poll out there. What is your organisation or company investing in / prioritising for the digital future? and internet communications, regular, reliable, fast, unlimited data and web access onshore and at sea is a clear winner with 43%. Ben is smiling next to me here. Cybersecurity, security against cyber attacks, 23%. Again, Ben is smiling. Seafarer's digital ID, a globally recognized and accepted seafarer digital identity, which two people have talked about here, 14%. And then training and career development for a digital world has to follow on at 13%. And then secure digital payments for crew and suppliers on time and fully secure is at number 5. But I'm sure that all of your organisations would, that's the priorities, but I'm sure that they would all want to invest time and money into those. We're out of time, unfortunately. That leaves me to wrap up. I think we've learned a great deal today. We've understood that in this new world, we are starting to rely on networks. We can't just stay in the Isle of Man, in London, in Piraeus. We have to move to a position where we rely on a network of people globally, because the ships are global and we can't always and don't always need to rely on travel. We know that we need to be agile. Shipping has to move and has to move quickly. And digital transformation is not just a digital journey, it's a people journey as well. It's about transformation and organisational change. But it is a brave new world. Some of us have been pushed into it a little earlier than we were expecting, and some of us had got themselves ready, and I'm sure that there's a whole gamut between those two on a line from fully digital ready to actually being forced into it and now starting to move along that journey. From my side, I'd like to thank you, the audience, for logging in and for staying with us. I'd like to thank everybody who's asked questions and participated in the poll. I hope you've found this morning useful and informative. I'd like to thank my panel members for their valuable insight and for giving up their time this morning, and Aashish as well over there in Germany. I'd like to thank Lee and the team at Isle of Man Maritime behind the scenes for making this possible and for getting it out there and driving footfall into this webinar. That's been a fantastic success for us. We hope to see you all in person at LASW 23. It's the norm for us to put on the best party at the event, and I'm sure we'll be starting work on that as travel restrictions ease and as we get into being in person at events, although this will never go away. I'd like to also thank the team here at ELS and Studio One, Justin and the team, for a fantastic setup and a fantastic production. This has really blown me away that we can achieve this from their studios in the Isle of Man. I think the production has been fantastic. I hope you think the same thing. I'd like to just say to the LASW attendees, enjoy the rest of the week, enjoy the rain particularly, and please don't forget to tune into the 2 remaining Isle of Man Maritime webinars. Seafarers' welfare and well-being will be at 15:30 today, and environment, sustainability and adaptability will be at 15:30 on Thursday or tomorrow. Also, this has been recorded and we will send out links, so please share that. And it just leaves me to thank you and say, have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks, Al.